Hey everyone, imagine if you will a scenario where you had access to the pocketbooks, the purses, or the wallets of millions of people. And think about what kind of incentive structure that would create, or your ability to use that power or those incentive structures to benefit you or those you align with. I mean, just think about that. You know, as the average person, as the average Canadian, you know the only thing that you have at the end of the day is your paycheck or your income or your wealth to rely on. Anything outside of that is what restricts or restrains you in terms of your economic options or viability. That's a reality that all of us in the private sector have all recognized throughout the course of our adult lives. However, those who are part and parcel of the political class, those who have access to that mystical gun in the room, that metaphorical gun in the room, that representation of monopoly of force or violence, and based on decades and decades of precedent-setting capacities or abilities in terms of having access to millions of people's purses or wallets or pocketbooks, well, we're seeing today what that has done. I mean, you're looking at all over the Western world now today, and you must at least recognize that debt and deficits now rules the day. Where's ever this time where we even understand or recognize, or not, I shouldn't say we, because once again, those of us in the private sector, we have no choice but to deal with the reality. But those in the public sector, those who live off forced wealth and income redistribution, you see what that has done to those people. Every one of them, with very few exceptions, from the top all the way down to the lowest public sector employee, now have a complete sense of entitlement. Those in the public sector, once again, they're just, well, greed is ruling the day. And once again, they're incentivized to be that way. That's what the modern structure, that's what socialist structures do. They incentivize people to run to government for their means to an end. And that, as we're seeing today, that is what's at the precipice. That's what's at the core of greatly destroying proper incentive structures that has done so well to produce all that wealth and all that prosperity in the West, namely free markets, namely free people. Once again, though, the socialists, the authoritarian collectivists, they rely on the pretense or that underlying aspect of the free market or capitalism to produce all the wealth so that they can skim off the top more and more. And, you know, the more wealthy the private sector is, or the private individual, the higher the bar is before they start to revolt against those who keep plundering their incomes or that wealth. But at some point in time, no matter where you live, no matter what country, no matter what economic system you function under, at some point in time, the bow breaks and the people won't take it any longer. And it seems like this might very well push a lot of people over the edge. It might not seem like a big deal for those of us in the older generations that are used to being taxed to death, and for those who constantly seem to be willing to take whatever the hell the government throws at them, which does represent a substantial portion of the Canadian population, I'll add, sadly. But one thing I think the younger generation, because they've been raised in an era where they think everything is free, especially in the online universe. But I think once they start to realize that all this spending and all these taxes that the federal parties are imposing or using as a means to carry favor or buy votes, I think at some point in time, the millennials and Gen Z will come to realize, wait a minute, hey, nobody else is paying for this stuff. Oh, shoot, that means I'm going to be stuck paying for it. It'll probably be about that point that a whole lot of young millennials and Gen Zers will all of a sudden turn to being libertarians themselves. Headline out of CBC News, Politics, Liberals to boost spending and extend deficits while taxing luxury goods and internet giants. Trudeau offers support for students, sexual assault training for judges, and a new tax on internet giants. This is being reported by Aaron Wary, September 29th, 2019. So yeah, you heard that right. In addition to the extra spending, pumping up those debts and deficits, the federal Liberals are now looking to even tax all your social media platforms, add an extra layer of cost on top of that, as a means to take from you and benefit themselves. How you like them apples? I'll ask you younger generations, does that sound progressive? And if it does, Well, what kind of progressivism is it that you support? Because if being tax slaves or chattel to a ruling class is progressive, I don't ever want to be progressive. Justin Trudeau's Liberals launched their full campaign platform on Sunday with promises of new support for post-secondary students and graduates, paid for in part by new taxes on internet giants and luxury goods. In total, the Liberals are proposing new investments of $9.3 billion in 2020-2021, rising to $17 billion in the fourth year of the second mandate. The federal deficit would increase to $27.4 billion in 2020-2021, declining to $21 billion in 2023 to 2024. Now, that's already ridiculous amounts of money, but once again, as we're seeing time and time again, folks, now that they're in full campaign mode, it's all about buying votes. They're going to promise you the world right now, but once again, that's like taking $1 from you and promising you 4 back. When in reality, they're going to take that $1 from you, and at best, you might see a dime. You need to really start thinking about these things, Canada, and especially you younger folks. Because like I say, these promises, well, you'll find out what they amount to, and trust me, it's not worth much. Matter of fact, it means a negative return for you throughout the course of your entire life. The Liberals promised in 2015 to run 3 years of deficits before returning the federal budget to balance in 2019. And yet, one more broken promise from the federal Liberals. With the new promises, the federal debt-to-GDP ratio would still decline from 30.9% in 2021 to 30.2% in 2023-24. So now that's the new way they measure is the more prosperous you are. Like I say, now they just measure how much they're going to spend and how prosperous you are. So the more prosperous you are, the more they're going to tax you. Once again, this is all based on speculative numbers that at some point in time, and it probably won't take long, it'll be proven to be completely full of crap. I mean, let's face it, folks. If federal parties or even provincial parties actually understood proper economics and were good at crunching numbers, yeah, we wouldn't find ourselves in such an economic conundrum that we are in today. Politically, the Liberal platform increases the party's contrast with the Conservatives between a Liberal proposal to spend more and a Conservative commitment to spend less. The Liberal proposal might also reduce the space between themselves and the NDP, their rivals on the left. Anyways, folks, I'll place a link to this article in the description of the video. I think the biggest thing from this is, of course, they're going to spend. Once again, they're incentivized. When there's no way to restrain or restrict their ability to spend other people's money, well, of course they're going to spend other people's money. And now that no one's actually tied to like the gold standard or anything, and we're just functioning off fully fiat currencies, well, they can just print that stuff. And, well, it'll destroy the purchasing power. You'll see that in the reflection of all the inflation of all the consumable goods or the staples you need to sustain yourself, such as food, fuel, and housing. But they don't care. They don't care because to them, it's that death by 1,000 cuts. It's minimal at best for each individual. Now, to the entire country of Canada, it's a big deal. $27 billion, that's a huge deal. But, you know, if you can spread that pain around to millions and millions of people, or not just the millions alive today, but even millions alive in the future, well, I guess that pain doesn't feel so bad. But once again, if we all had to pay for this stuff that's promised in the here and now, if we had to pay for it all and didn't have the ability to afford that kind of debt slavery onto future successive generations, well, even the people that support the Liberals would be up in arms and say, no, I just can't afford it. But once again, when they can plunder the economic prosperity of someone else to pay for it, well, all of a sudden that's a good idea, right? Once again, folks, we really do got to get back to basics, in particular when you're talking about economics. And in particular, to be a free human being and not a debt slave to a ruling class. So, security.